Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English in Moments. I'm Elena, your host for today's lesson. And today, I want to begin with a question that I think about more than almost anything else in language teaching. What is the distance between what you feel and what you can say? For most people, in any language, that distance is significant. We have rich, complex, layered inner lives, full of memory and imagination and fear and desire and regret and wonder and the thousands of unnamed things that move through us every hour of every day. And yet, most of us, in any language, have only a fraction of the vocabulary we need to describe what is actually happening inside us. In a second language, that distance becomes even larger. Because even when you have found the English for the big emotions, the obvious ones, the ones in every textbook, you still may not have the words for the precise activity of your own mind. Not just that you feel afraid, but what your fear is doing. Not just that you miss something, but the specific quality of that missing. Not just that you remember, but how memory arrives and what it does when it comes. Today, we are closing that distance. We are covering 300 English words for the inner life. Words for what the mind does with what it feels. Words for the activity of consciousness itself. Remembering, imagining, fearing, desiring, regretting, hoping, doubting, wondering, grieving, and the extraordinary moments when understanding arrives completely. 12 categories, 25 words each, 300 words in total. These are not simple words. They are not the words on page 1 of a vocabulary book. They are the words that exist at the point where language becomes philosophy, where describing an inner experience requires not just knowing a word, but understanding the particular quality of a state, how long it lasts, how it moves, what it does to the person who is in it. For every word, I will give you the definition, yes, but more importantly, I will give you what the word captures about the inner experience, the texture of it, the particular shade of it, what it feels like from the inside. And I will give you a natural example sentence so you can hear it living in real language. Say every example out loud after me. These words become yours not when you understand them, but when you have spoken them, when they have been in your mouth and belong to your voice. 12 categories. Let us begin. Category 1, words of memory. These 25 words describe the many different ways the past lives in the present, how memory arrives, what it does, how it changes and fades, and the particular quality of different kinds of remembering. Word 1, reminisce. Definition: to indulge in enjoyable recollection of past events. What it captures: the deliberate, pleasurable activity of calling up the past. To reminisce is not passive. It is an active, often shared, often nostalgic revisiting. You choose to reminisce. The mood is warm even when what is remembered is tinged with sadness. Example: they spent the whole evening reminiscing about the years they had spent working together. By the end of it, both of them were glad they had. Repeat. Reminisce. Word 2, recollect. Definition: to remember something, particularly through conscious mental effort. What it captures: a more deliberate and effortful form of remembering than simply remembering. To recollect something is to work at bringing it back, to search the mind actively. The word carries the awareness of the effort involved. Example: She struggled to recollect exactly what he had said. The words were there somewhere. She could feel them, but not quite reach them. Repeat. Recollect. Word 3. Evoke. Definition. To bring or recall to the conscious mind. To summon up a feeling, memory, or image. What it captures. The capacity of things outside the mind. A smell, a song, a photograph. To draw something from inside it. To evoke is to call something into presence. The word carries a sense of the involuntary power of sensation over memory. Example. The smell of that particular wood polish evokes the school she attended as a child, with a vividness that still surprises her. Repeat. Evoke. Word 4. Flashback. Definition. A sudden, vivid memory of a past event that intrudes into the present. What it captures. Memory that arrives without invitation. A flashback is not chosen. It comes. The word carries urgency and intensity. Something from the past briefly becoming as real as the present. Used in clinical contexts for trauma, but also in everyday use for any sudden, sharp, involuntary memory. Example. A particular chord in the song produced a flashback so complete that for a moment she genuinely forgot what year she was in. Repeat. Flashback. Word 5. Nostalgia. Definition. A sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy associations. What it captures. A complex emotional state. Not simply missing the past, but the particular bittersweet awareness that it is gone and cannot be recovered. Nostalgia is love directed backward in time. It is the simultaneous pleasure of the memory and the ache of the distance. Example. The old photographs produced a wave of nostalgia so strong it was almost physical. Not just missing the place, but missing who he had been in it. Repeat. Nostalgia. Word 6. Reminiscence. Definition. A story told about a past event remembered by the narrator. What it captures. Memory externalized, turned into narrative and shared. Where reminiscing is the activity, a reminiscence is the product. An old person sharing reminiscences is giving their memory as a gift to whoever will receive it. Example. Her reminiscences of the war years were extraordinarily detailed. She remembered things most people would have long since let go. Repeat. Reminiscence. Word 7. Imprint. Definition. An impression or mark left by something. To fix something firmly in the mind. What it captures. Memory that does not just record but permanently marks. Something that imprints on the mind changes it in some lasting way. The way a seal leaves its impression in wax. The word carries permanence. Example. The experience imprinted itself on her in a way she could not fully explain. Years later, she would return to it without knowing why. Repeat. Imprint. Word 8. Amnesia. Definition. A partial or total loss of memory. What it captures. The absence of memory as an experience in itself. Amnesia is not simply forgetting. It is a gap in the self, because who we are is so substantially made of what we remember. The word carries both clinical specificity and existential weight. Example: the amnesia was selective, which was in some ways harder than total loss. He remembered some things with perfect clarity and others not at all. Repeat: amnesia. Word 9. Retrospective. Definition: looking back on or dealing with past events. A retrospective exhibition or review. What it captures: the quality of looking backward in time with some distance and perspective. A retrospective view is not immediate memory. It is memory organized and evaluated from a position of greater understanding than was available at the time. Example: in retrospect, she could see that everything that had happened was leading toward this. At the time, it had felt like chaos. Repeat: retrospective. Word 10. Déjà vu. Definition: the feeling of having already experienced the present situation. What it captures: one of the strangest tricks the mind plays. The uncanny sensation that what is new has somehow been experienced before. Déjà vu is a glitch in the machinery of memory, an experience of temporal dislocation that is as fascinating as it is disorienting. Example: a powerful sense of déjà vu stopped her in the middle of the sentence. She was certain she had stood in this room and said these words before. She had not. Repeat: déjà vu. Word 11. Vivid. Definition: producing powerful feelings or strong, clear images in the mind. Strikingly bright or strong. What it captures: when applied to memory, the word describes the quality of a recollection that has retained the intensity and sensory richness of the original experience. Vivid memories are not faded. They have kept their color. Example: her memories of that summer are vivid in a way that later years have not been. She can still feel the heat of the stone beneath her hands. Repeat: vivid. Word 12. Blur. Definition: something that cannot be seen, heard, or remembered clearly. What it captures: memory at its most degraded, not gone, but indistinct. The blur of a memory is often associated with overwhelming emotion or the simple passage of time. Things blur when there was too much happening to take in clearly, or when it was too long ago to hold. Example: the first year after the move was a blur. She could retrieve fragments, but not the sequence or the texture of it. Repeat: blur. Word 13. Engrave. Definition: to cut or carve a design into a surface, to fix firmly in the mind. What it captures: when used for memory, the word emphasizes permanence and precision. Something engraved in the memory is not just remembered, but deeply and lastingly marked. The metaphor implies that the memory has changed the structure of the mind that holds it. Example: the image is engraved in her memory with an almost uncomfortable clarity. Every detail preserved as precisely as if it happened yesterday. Repeat: engrave. Word 14. Haunt. Definition: to appear as a ghost. To be persistently and disturbingly present in the mind. What it captures: a memory that haunts is not invited and not controllable. It comes back without permission and with a particular quality of unease or grief. Haunting memories are not pleasant nostalgia. They are the past returning in the wrong hour, in the wrong light. Example: the question she had not asked haunted her for years. Not the one she had asked, the one she had held back. Repeat. Haunt. Word 15. Fade. Definition: to gradually grow faint and disappear. What it captures: the natural process of memory loss. Not forgetting suddenly, but diminishing gradually. The fading of a memory is one of the most melancholy of all inner experiences because you can feel it happening but cannot stop it. Example: the memory of his voice was fading. She knew this and could not prevent it, which was its own particular kind of grief. Repeat. Fade. Word 16. Selective. Definition: relating to or involving selection, carefully chosen from a larger number. What it captures: in the context of memory, selective refers to the way the mind chooses what to retain and what to release, often without the conscious participation of the person. Selective memory is not always deliberate, but it is never neutral. Example: her memory was extraordinarily selective. Every slight was perfectly preserved. Every kindness seemed to fade. Repeat. Selective. Word 17. Reconstruct. Definition: to build or create again. To mentally reassemble something from its parts. What it captures: the active work of rebuilding a memory that has become fragmented. To reconstruct a memory is to acknowledge that memory is not simple recording, but active construction, and that the reconstruction may not perfectly resemble the original. Example: he spent years trying to reconstruct what had happened that afternoon. Each reconstruction was slightly different from the last. Repeat. Reconstruct. Word 18. Visceral. Definition: relating to deep inward feelings rather than the intellect. What it captures: when applied to memory, visceral describes the kind of recollection that is felt in the body before it is processed by the mind. A visceral memory is one that arrives as a physical sensation, the stomach, the chest, the throat, before it becomes a thought. Example: the memory of that conversation produces a visceral response even now. Something in the body knows it before the mind catches up. Repeat. Visceral. Word 19. Collective. Definition: done by people acting as a group, shared or common to all members of a group. What it captures: memory that belongs not to one person, but to a community or generation. Collective memory is the shared past of a culture, the events and experiences that bind people together through common recollection. Example: the flood of 1953 lives in the collective memory of the community in ways that official records cannot fully capture. Repeat. Collective. Word 20. Latent. Definition: existing but not yet developed or manifest. Hidden. What it captures: a latent memory is one that exists beneath conscious awareness, present but not currently active, waiting for the right trigger to bring it to the surface. The word captures the depth at which some memories are stored. Example: the latent memory was there all along. She simply had not had a reason to surface it until that moment. Repeat. Latent. Word 21. Distort. Definition. To pull or twist out of shape. To give a false or misleading account. What it captures. What time and emotion do to memory. Changing it gradually away from what actually happened towards something that serves the needs or beliefs of the person doing the remembering. Distorted memories are not lies. They are the honest errors of a mind working through imperfect material. Example. He was aware that his memory of the relationship had distorted over the years. The version he carried was not quite the version that had existed. Repeat. Distort. Word 22. Sensory. Definition. Relating to sensation or the physical senses. What it captures. The quality of memory that is rooted in the body's original experience. Sensory memory preserves not the narrative of an event, but the smell, sound, texture, or taste of it. These are often the most durable and most transporting forms of recall. Example. Sensory memory is the most powerful kind. The smell of that particular soap brought her back to her grandmother's bathroom without a single conscious thought. Repeat. Sensory. Word 23. Involuntary. Definition. Done without conscious control, not deliberate. What it captures. The quality of memory that arrives without being summoned, the opposite of recollecting. Involuntary memory is what happens when a trigger in the environment bypasses conscious intention and delivers a memory directly. Proust's Madeleine is the most famous literary example. Example. Involuntary memory can arrive with a force and completeness that deliberate recollection rarely manages. Repeat. Involuntary. Word 24. Archive. Definition. A collection of historical documents or records. To place in an archive. What it captures. The metaphor of the mind as a storage system with different levels of accessibility. Things archived in the mind are not forgotten. They are stored, waiting, available to be retrieved, but not currently active. The word implies organized depth. Example. She had archived the memory rather than let it go. It was there, available, just not on the surface where it could reach her. Repeat. Archive. Word 25. Crystallize. Definition. To form or cause to form crystals. To make or become definite and clear. What it captures. The moment when a memory or understanding becomes completely clear and fixed. When something that was vague or unstable suddenly becomes solid and precise. A memory crystallizes when all its elements align into a form that can be held. Example. The memory crystallized in the telling of it. She had not understood what it meant until she tried to say it out loud. Repeat. Crystallize. 25 words of memory. And already you have a vocabulary that goes far beyond simply remembering and forgetting. Let us continue. Category 2. Words of imagination. These 25 words describe the mind's capacity to create what does not yet exist, to build images, narratives, possibilities, and worlds entirely from within. Word 26. Envision. Definition. To imagine as a future possibility. What it captures, the deliberate act of imagining something that does not yet exist but might. To envision is to create a mental picture of a possible future, and in doing so, to begin the process of making it real. Example. She could envision the finished building so clearly that the gap between the image and the empty lot felt almost impatient. Repeat. Envision. Word 27. Conjure. Definition. To call into existence by or as if by magic. To summon a spirit. What it captures. Imagination at its most active and generative. Not merely picturing, but genuinely creating. To conjure something is to bring it into being through the power of the mind. The word carries a slight magic, a slight willfulness. Example. She could conjure his voice so precisely that for a moment it was genuinely present in the room. Repeat. Conjure. Word 28. Fantasize. Definition. To indulge in daydreaming about something desired. What it captures. Imagination directed toward the fulfillment of desire, creating mental scenarios of what we want but do not have. Fantasizing is often private and often pleasurable, though it can also become its own form of avoidance. Example. He had spent years fantasizing about what it would be like to simply leave everything behind. One morning, he realized the fantasy had become a plan. Repeat. Fantasize. Word 29. Speculate. Definition. To form a theory without firm evidence. To invest in stocks at risk of loss. What it captures. Imagination applied to the unknown, creating possible explanations or futures based on limited information. To speculate is to think beyond what is known into what might be. The word carries both the excitement of the possible and the awareness of uncertainty. Example. She could only speculate about what had happened after she left. The truth of it would remain unavailable to her. Repeat. Speculate. Word 30. Visualize. Definition. To form a mental image of something. To make visible. What it captures. The specific capacity to produce internal images. To see with the mind's eye. Some people visualize with great clarity and color. Others report having almost no visual imagination at all. The word names both the capacity and the act. Example. She found it almost impossible to visualize the space without walking through it first. Some things had to be experienced before they could be imagined. Repeat. Visualize. Word 31. Daydream. Definition. To indulge in a series of pleasant thoughts as a form of escapism. What it captures. The informal, wandering, pleasurable form of imagination. The minds drift away from present reality into something more preferred. Daydreaming is passive in a way that fantasizing is not. It happens to you more than you do it. Example. She caught herself daydreaming again. The meeting had been going for 40 minutes, and she had no idea what had been said. Repeat. Daydream. Word 32. Hypothetical. Definition. Of or based on a hypothesis. supposed but not necessarily real. What it captures: the grammatical structure of imagination, the if. A hypothetical scenario is one that has not happened but could, and considering it allows us to prepare for possibilities and explore what we value or fear. Example: he refused to engage with hypotheticals. She thought this was a significant limitation in a person who needed to plan. Repeat. Hypothetical. Word 33. Projection. Definition: the presentation of an image on a surface. The unconscious transfer of one's own feelings to others. What it captures: in psychological usage, the mind's habit of attributing its own feelings, fears, or desires to other people. Projection is imagination misapplied, creating a fiction about another person based on what is true about yourself. Example: she recognized the projection for what it was. The anger she attributed to him was entirely her own. Repeat. Projection. Word 34. Scenario. Definition: a postulated sequence of events, especially an imagined sequence. What it captures: a complete imagined story, not just a single image, but a chain of events. To run a scenario in the mind is to play out a possible future or past in some detail, often to test its implications. Example: he had run every possible scenario in the hours before the meeting. The one that actually happened was none of them. Repeat. Scenario. Word 35. Ideation. Definition: the formation of ideas or concepts. What it captures: the process of idea generation itself, the moment when imagination produces something new that has not existed before. Ideation is creative imagination at its most functional, most purposeful. Example: the most productive period of ideation is often not the formal meeting, but the hour before sleep. Repeat. Ideation. Word 36. Reverie. Definition: a state of being pleasantly lost in one's thoughts, a daydream. What it captures: the deepest and most absorbing form of mental wandering, more complete than a daydream, more transported. In a reverie, the external world genuinely recedes. The word carries a slight enchantment, a quality of being elsewhere. Example: he was deep in reverie when she spoke. Coming back to the room felt like surfacing from considerable depth. Repeat. Reverie. Word 37. Prescient. Definition: having or showing knowledge of events before they take place. What it captures: the quality of an imagined future that turns out to have been accurate. A prescient person seems to have imagined the future correctly before it arrived. The word attributes this to a particular sensitivity or intelligence rather than to magic. Example: her prescient sense that the project would fail was not pessimism. It was the result of careful attention to things others were choosing not to see. Repeat. Prescient. Word 38. Abstraction. Definition: the quality of dealing with ideas rather than events. A general idea. What it captures: imagination operating at the level of concepts rather than images. The mind's capacity to think about things that have no physical form. Abstract thinking is the imagination working in the space of ideas rather than the space of pictures. Example: her thinking had a high level of abstraction that could make it difficult to translate into practical action. The ideas were rich. The implementation was harder. Repeat. Abstraction. Word 39. Invention. Definition. The action of inventing something. A thing that has been invented. What it captures. Imagination that produces something genuinely new and functional. To invent is to imagine something into existence, to cross from the mental into the physical. The word celebrates the creative power of the imagining mind. Example: the invention began as a frustration. He was tired of a problem that didn't need to exist, and the anger became imagination, and the imagination became something real. Repeat. Invention. Word 40. Counterfactual. Definition. Relating to what has not happened or is not the case. What it captures. Imagining the world as it would be if something that happened had not happened, or something that did not happen had. Counterfactual thinking. What if the other choice had been made? Is one of the most universal and most painful activities of the human mind. Example: counterfactual thinking is seductive and usually unhelpful. She knew this and could not stop doing it. Repeat. Counterfactual. Word 41. Prophetic. Definition. Accurately predicting or describing the future. Of or relating to a prophet. What it captures. Imagination that has the quality of foresight, that sees something true about the future before it arrives. A prophetic vision is not magic, but often the product of deep attention and pattern recognition. Example: the book felt prophetic when she reread it 20 years later. He had described the world they now lived in with uncomfortable precision. Repeat. Prophetic. Word 42. Intuition. Definition. The ability to understand something immediately, without the need for conscious reasoning. What it captures. Knowledge that arrives without traceable process. The mind's capacity to reach a conclusion through routes that bypass conscious analysis. Intuition is imagination and pattern recognition working faster than language. Example: her intuition about people was almost never wrong. She could not explain how she knew. She simply knew. Repeat. Intuition. Word 43. Conceptualize. Definition. To form a concept or idea of something. What it captures. The active process of moving from a vague sense of something to a clear idea of it, giving mental form to what was previously only felt or sensed. Example: he struggled to conceptualize what a different kind of life would look like. The feeling of wanting one was clear. The specifics were not. Repeat. Conceptualize. Word 44. Lateral. Definition. Situated at the side, using a form of creative thinking that approaches problems indirectly. What it captures. In thinking, lateral describes the capacity to approach a problem from an unexpected angle, to find the solution that nobody thought to look for because they were all looking in the same direction. Example: the solution was entirely lateral. Nobody who had been thinking about it directly would have found it. She came to it from completely elsewhere. Repeat. Lateral. Word 45. Inception. Definition. The establishment or starting point of an institution or activity. What it captures. The exact moment at which an idea comes into existence, before it has developed, before it has been tested, at the first moment of its being. Inception is the birth of a thought. Example: The inception of the idea was almost invisible, a half sentence at the end of a long conversation that nobody wrote down. Repeat. Inception. Word 46. Extrapolate. Definition. To extend the application of a conclusion to an unknown situation by assuming it will continue. What it captures. Imagination as a form of logical extension, taking what is known and projecting it into what is not yet known, on the assumption that patterns will continue. Extrapolation is controlled, reasoned imagination. Example. From the early data, it was possible to extrapolate a trajectory. Whether the trajectory would hold was a different question. Repeat. Extrapolate. Word 47. Fabricate. Definition. To manufacture something, to invent or concoct something in order to deceive. What it captures. Imagination applied to the construction of things that are not true. Stories, memories, explanations. To fabricate is to build something out of nothing. The word carries moral weight. It implies a deliberate and dishonest construction. Example. She had not lied exactly. She had fabricated a context that made the truth seem like something different from what it was. Repeat. Fabricate. Word 48. Synthesize. Definition. To combine elements to form a connected whole. What it captures. The imagination's capacity to take separate ideas and create from them something unified and new. Synthesis is creative in a way that simple accumulation is not. It produces something that is more than the sum of its parts. Example. The most creative people are often those who are best at synthesis, bringing together ideas from different fields and finding what they share. Repeat. Synthesize. Word 49. Fertile. Definition. Able to conceive young, producing abundantly, able to produce many new ideas. What it captures. In the context of imagination, fertile describes a mind or moment that is particularly generative, producing ideas easily and abundantly. A fertile imagination is one that creates without difficulty. Example. The period after the loss was unexpectedly among the most creatively fertile of her life. Grief had broken something open. Repeat. Fertile. Word 50. Transcend. Definition. To be or go beyond the range or limits of. To surpass. What it captures. The imagination's capacity to go beyond the boundaries of the known and the given. To think in ways that exceed the ordinary limitations of experience or understanding. To transcend is to reach something that ordinary thinking cannot. Example. At its best, great art transcends the circumstances of its creation. It speaks to people who share none of the artist's context. Repeat. Transcend. 50 words. 2 complete categories. Your vocabulary for memory and imagination has expanded into territory that most learners never reach. Let us continue. Category 3. Words of fear. These 25 words describe the many faces of fear, anxiety, dread, panic, foreboding, and all the specific forms that the experience of threat or danger takes in the human mind. Word 51, apprehension. Definition: anxiety or fear that something bad or unpleasant will happen. What it captures: fear that is directed toward the future, the anticipation of something difficult before it arrives. Apprehension is milder than dread and more specific than general anxiety. It is the feeling before the thing rather than during it. Example: a low level of apprehension had been present all week. Nothing specific had happened yet. That was almost the problem. Repeat: apprehension. Word 52, dread. Definition: to anticipate with great apprehension or fear. What it captures: a more intense and sustained form of anticipatory fear than apprehension. Dread has weight to it. It presses down. It is the feeling of knowing something difficult is coming and being unable to escape that knowledge. Example: she dreaded the conversation, not because she thought it would go badly, but because she knew it would change things permanently. Repeat: dread. Word 53, foreboding. Definition: a feeling that something bad will happen, a premonition. What it captures: fear without a specific object, the sense that something is wrong before you know what. Foreboding is intuitive and often difficult to justify. It is the emotional atmosphere before the event. Example: there was a foreboding in the room that nobody named but everyone felt. The meeting proceeded carefully around it. Repeat: foreboding. Word 54, trepidation. Definition: a feeling of fear or agitation about something that may happen. What it captures: a specific and slightly formal word for the nervous, uncertain fear that precedes a challenging action. Trepidation is the feeling before you step forward into something you are not sure of. Example: she approached the stage with considerable trepidation. 300 people was 300 people, regardless of how many times she had done it before. Repeat: trepidation. Word 55, phobia. Definition: an extreme or irrational fear of or aversion to something. What it captures: fear that has become disproportionate and specific, attached to an object or situation in a way that is beyond ordinary risk assessment. A phobia is a fear that the rational mind cannot easily override. Example: the phobia had been with her since childhood. She had never managed to trace it to its source, and it had never fully left. Repeat: phobia. Word 56, paranoia. Definition: a mental condition characterized by delusions of persecution or unwarranted jealousy. What it captures: fear that has constructed a narrative, a belief that the threat is specifically directed at you and is coordinated and intentional. Paranoia turns free-floating fear into a story in which you are the target. Example: the paranoia was understandable given what had happened. The difficulty was distinguishing the part that was reasonable from the part that was not. Repeat: paranoia. Word 57, unease. Definition: a feeling of anxiety or discomfort. What it captures: a mild but persistent form of fear or discomfort that cannot be precisely identified. Unease is the feeling that something is not quite right, that the situation is not quite safe, without being able to say exactly why. Example: a low level of unease stayed with her throughout the day. Nothing had happened, nothing she could point to. just the feeling. Repeat. Unease. Word 58. Visceral. Definition. Relating to deep inward feelings rather than the intellect. What it captures. Fear experienced in the body before the mind has processed it. A visceral fear is not reasoned. It is felt in the stomach, the chest, the throat, the skin. The body knows before the mind arrives. Example. The visceral fear came first. The rational assessment of the danger came several seconds later, by which time the body had already responded. Repeat. Visceral. Word 59. Phobic. Definition. Having an extreme or irrational fear of something. What it captures. The adjectival form, describing a person or their response in relation to a specific fear. Phobic describes not just the fear itself, but the characteristic response it produces. Example. She was phobic about abandonment in a way that had shaped every relationship she had ever had. Repeat. Phobic. Word 60. Catastrophize. Definition. To view or present a situation as considerably worse than it actually is. What it captures. The mind's habit of following fear to its worst possible conclusion, imagining the most extreme negative outcome and treating it as the likely one. Catastrophizing is the imagination in the service of fear. Example. She knew she was catastrophizing. Knowing this did not make the catastrophe feel less real. Repeat. Catastrophize. Word 61. Hypervigilance. Definition. A state of being on high alert, involving excessive monitoring for threat. What it captures. Fear that has become a permanent mode of operation. The body and mind in a constant state of watchfulness, scanning for danger even when none is present. Hypervigilance is exhausting because the scanning never stops. Example. The hypervigilance had become invisible even to her. She had been in that state so long she had forgotten what rest felt like. Repeat. Hypervigilance. Word 62. Existential. Definition. Of or relating to existence, especially human existence as viewed in the theories of existentialism. What it captures. Fear that goes to the fundamental level. Not fear of a specific event, but fear about the nature of existence itself. Existential dread is the awareness of one's own mortality, meaninglessness, or radical freedom. Example. The existential anxiety arrived in the small hours with uncomfortable regularity. Questions about purpose tend to wait for darkness. Repeat. Existential. Word 63. Agoraphobia. Definition. A fear of situations where escape might be difficult, often open or crowded spaces. What it captures. A specific form of fear that has organized itself around the concept of being trapped or exposed. Agoraphobia is the anxiety of space and openness, the feeling of being unprotected. Example. The agoraphobia had developed gradually. She noticed it first as mild discomfort in crowded places, and only much later understood what it was. Repeat. Agoraphobia. Word 64. Premonition. Definition. A strong feeling that something is about to happen, especially something unpleasant. What it captures. The intuitive fear that precedes a specific event. Not general anxiety, but the particular sense that something particular and bad is coming. A premonition is fear with a target, even if the target is not yet visible. Example: she had a premonition about the trip that she could not shake. She went anyway. Later, she would not be surprised by what happened. Repeat. Premonition. Word 65. Timidity. Definition: lacking in courage or confidence, easily frightened. What it captures: fear as a chronic feature of character rather than a response to a specific threat. The timid person is one whose fear has become their default, shrinking from challenge, avoiding exposure, playing small. Example: his timidity in professional situations contrasted oddly with the boldness of his private life. He was two different people, apparently. Repeat. Timidity. Word 66. Irrational. Definition: not based on reason or clear thinking. What it captures: fear that the mind knows is disproportionate to the actual risk, but cannot reduce by knowing this. Irrational fear is the experience of being convinced by your own anxiety, despite your own better judgment. Example: she knew the fear was irrational. This knowledge coexisted with the fear without reducing it in the slightest. Repeat. Irrational. Word 67. Spiral. Definition: moving in a continuous curve around a central point, to deteriorate rapidly. What it captures: the particular movement of anxiety when it becomes self-reinforcing, each fearful thought generating another, each escalation producing the next, the whole system gaining momentum. A spiral of anxiety is not easily interrupted. Example: she recognized the spiral beginning and could not stop it. That was the particular cruelty of it, knowing exactly what was happening and being unable to interrupt it. Repeat. Spiral. Word 68. Recoil. Definition: to suddenly move back in fear or disgust, to spring back. What it captures: the physical expression of fear, the instinctive pulling away from something threatening or repellent. Recoil is the body's fear before the mind has processed what it is afraid of. Example: she recoiled from the possibility even in thought. Some things the mind does not want to touch. Repeat. Recoil. Word 69. Vulnerable. Definition: exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. What it captures: the state of being open to harm, the condition that makes fear appropriate and natural. Vulnerability is not weakness, but the honest acknowledgement of one's exposure. The fear that accompanies it is the appropriate fear of someone who knows they can be hurt. Example: she felt unexpectedly vulnerable when he left the room. She had not known, until that moment, how much of her sense of safety had been organized around his presence. Repeat. Vulnerable. Word 70. Anxious. Definition: experiencing worry, unease, or nervousness about something with an uncertain outcome. What it captures: the most general and most commonly experienced form of fear, directed not at a specific event, but at the uncertain future. Anxiety is fear spread across time rather than concentrated in a moment. Example: she was anxious in a way that had no single cause and no single solution. It was simply the weather of her inner life. Repeat. Anxious. Word 71. Petrified. Definition: So frightened that one is unable to move or think. What it captures. Fear at its most paralyzing. Not just strong, but total. To be petrified is to have fear so completely fill the system that normal function becomes impossible. The word comes from the turning of living things to stone. Example: she was petrified before every performance in a way that never diminished with experience. And then she walked out, and she performed. Repeat. Petrified. Word 72. Inhibition. Definition. A feeling that makes one self-conscious and unable to act naturally. A mental mechanism that restrains impulse. What it captures. Fear that operates at the level of action, preventing the person from doing what they might otherwise do. Inhibition is not the fear of a specific threat, but the accumulated self-consciousness that holds people back from full expression. Example: the inhibition she felt in large groups had shaped her entire professional life without her always being aware of it. Repeat. Inhibition. Word 73. Balk. Definition. To hesitate or refuse to proceed when faced with a problem or obstacle. What it captures. The moment when fear wins. When the mind or body refuses to move forward despite the intention to do so. To balk is to stop at the threshold and find you cannot cross it. Example: she balked at the final paragraph. Everything that followed would be irreversible, and her hand would not move. Repeat. Balk. Word 74. Creeping. Definition. Moving slowly and quietly, gradually developing. What it captures. Fear that arrives gradually rather than suddenly, accumulating unnoticed until it has become significant. Creeping fear is the most insidious kind because you do not see it arriving. Example: a creeping anxiety had been building for weeks without her fully acknowledging it. When it finally surfaced, it arrived fully formed. Repeat. Creeping. Word 75. Flinch. Definition. To make a quick, nervous movement as an instinctive reaction to fear or pain. What it captures. The smallest possible expression of fear. The involuntary physical response that the body produces before the conscious mind has time to suppress it. A flinch is the honest body betraying what the composed face wants to conceal. Example: he flinched at the sudden sound in a way that told her more about his state of mind than any conversation had. Repeat. Flinch. 75 words. 3 complete categories. Let us move into desire, one of the richest and most underserved areas of English vocabulary for the inner life. Category 4. Words of desire. These 25 words describe the experience of wanting in all its intensities, all its specific forms, all its relationships to what is possible and what is not. Word 76. Yearn. Definition. To have an intense feeling of longing for something, typically something one has lost or been separated from. What it captures. Desire that has a quality of ache in it. Wanting that is sustained and deep and not easily satisfied. To yearn is not simply to want, but to want with an awareness of the distance between you and what you want. Example: she yearned for the particular kind of quiet that her childhood home had had. Nothing she had found since had quite reproduced it. Repeat. Yearn. Word 77. Covet. Definition: to desire something belonging to another. What it captures: desire directed at what someone else has, tinged with envy and a sense of the wrongness of the wanting. To covet is to want with a moral complexity attached. Example: she coveted his certainty more than anything specific he had achieved. To know what you want so clearly seemed an extraordinary gift. Repeat. Covet. Word 78. Crave. Definition: to feel a powerful desire for something. What it carries: desire with urgency in it, not the steady ache of yearning, but the more pressing physical quality of craving. Something craved is something the system feels it needs rather than simply wants. Example: she craved stillness in the way that other people craved stimulation. Everything in her life was too loud and too fast and too much. Repeat. Crave. Word 79. Aspire. Definition: to direct one's hopes and ambitions toward achieving something. What it captures: desire directed upward, wanting something that is better than or beyond your current situation. To aspire is to desire in a way that also involves effort and reaching. Example: she aspired to a level of honesty in her work that she had not yet achieved. The aspiration itself was useful, even when the achievement was incomplete. Repeat. Aspire. Word 80. Hunger. Definition: a feeling of discomfort caused by lack of food, a strong desire or craving. What it captures: desire at its most physical and urgent, the wanting that the body produces before the mind refines it. When used metaphorically, hunger captures the rawness and the force of wanting. Example: there was a hunger in the way she worked that made everyone around her slightly uncomfortable and entirely impressed. Repeat. Hunger. Word 81. Longing. Definition: a yearning desire. What it captures: perhaps the purest word for sustained, unresolved desire. Wanting something that is absent or unreachable. Carrying that want over time without release. Longing is desire that has learned to live without its object. Example: the longing for home was not for any specific place, but for a particular quality of belonging she had felt once and not found again. Repeat. Longing. Word 82. Lust. Definition: very strong sexual desire, an intense desire for something. What it captures: desire at its most physical and immediate. In non-sexual contexts, lust describes a powerful wanting that is felt in the body before the mind. The intense appetite for something that feels almost necessary. Example: there was a lust for the work in its early stages that gradually, inevitably, became something more like discipline. Repeat. Lust. Word 83. Fixation. Definition: an obsessive interest in or feeling about someone or something. What it captures: desire that has become stuck, unable to move on from its object, returning to it repeatedly despite the person's intention or effort. A fixation is desire that has become structurally attached. Example: the fixation on what had been said in that one conversation had lasted years. She could not find the mechanism to let it go. Repeat. Fixation. Word 84. Ambition. Definition: a strong desire to do or achieve something. What it captures: desire that is directed toward achievement and that provides sustained motivation over time. Ambition is desire with structure, wanting organized into goals and effort. Example: her ambition was not performative. It was quiet and persistent and entirely private, which made it more powerful than the louder kind. Repeat. Ambition. Word 85. Wistful. Definition: having or showing a feeling of vague or regretful longing. What it captures: desire tinged with sadness, wanting something that is past or impossible or just slightly out of reach, with a gentleness and a resignation that distinguishes it from active longing. Wistful desire has made its peace with not having. Example: she looked at the photographs with a wistful expression that was not quite sadness and not quite contentment, but something very precisely in between. Repeat. Wistful. Word 86. Infatuation. Definition: an intense but short-lived passion or admiration for someone or something. What it captures: desire at its most consuming and least rational. The state in which a person becomes so preoccupied with another that normal perspective is temporarily lost. Infatuation does not see clearly because it does not want to. Example: the infatuation lasted about 6 weeks and was, during those 6 weeks, entirely totalizing. Nothing else had equivalent reality. Repeat. Infatuation. Word 87. Compulsion. Definition: the action or state of forcing or being forced to do something. An irresistible urge to behave in a certain way. What it captures: desire that has become demand, wanting that the system experiences as necessary rather than chosen. A compulsion is something you feel you must do, regardless of your conscious preference. Example: the compulsion to check the messages was stronger than her intention to stop. She watched herself do it and could not entirely prevent it. Repeat. Compulsion. Word 88. Appetite. Definition: a natural desire to satisfy a bodily need, especially for food. A strong desire or liking for something. What it captures: desire understood as natural and appropriate. The healthy wanting that is part of being alive. Appetite is desire without pathology. It suggests something that is supposed to be there. Example: she had a genuine appetite for the work that she had not expected to last as long as it had. Repeat. Appetite. Word 89. Ache. Definition: a continuous or prolonged dull pain. A yearning desire. What it captures: desire as physical sensation, wanting that is felt in the body as a kind of dull, persistent discomfort. An ache is not sharp, but it is continuous and it is real. Example: there was an ache in the thought of what might have been, not sharp enough to call grief, but present enough to be noticed. Repeat. Ache. Word 90. Thirst. Definition: a feeling of needing or wanting to drink. A strong desire for something. What it captures: desire experienced as need, the wanting that feels like deprivation. When used metaphorically, thirst suggests that the absence of what is wanted is actually felt as a kind of dryness, an insufficiency. Example: there was a genuine thirst for knowledge in her that had been unsatisfied for years. The right environment would have made an extraordinary difference. Repeat. Thirst. Word 91. Preoccupied. Definition: having one's mind fully engaged or busy with something. What it captures: desire or concern that has taken over the foreground of consciousness, leaving less room for other things. To be preoccupied is to be occupied in advance by something that has arrived before the present moment. Example: she was too preoccupied to really hear what he was saying. The other conversation, the one happening entirely in her own head, was louder. Repeat. Preoccupied. Word 92. Obsess. Definition: to preoccupy or fill the mind of someone continually and to a troubling extent. What it captures: desire or concern that has become intrusive, occupying the mind more than the person wants or intends. To obsess is to have something take up residence in your thinking without your full permission. Example: she obsessed over the details of the conversation for days. Every inflection, every pause, what it might have meant. Repeat. Obsess. Word 93. Restless. Definition: unable to rest or relax, constantly moving or acting. What it captures: desire without a specific object, the wanting that has not found its target, and so produces constant movement and dissatisfaction. A restless person is one whose desire has not yet found the thing that would satisfy it. Example: the restlessness had been with him his whole adult life. He had spent years trying to satisfy it with things that were not the thing it was asking for. Repeat. Restless. Word 94. Possessive. Definition: demanding someone's total attention and love, unwilling to share one's possessions. What it captures: desire that has become controlling, wanting something or someone so completely that the wanting imposes on their freedom. Possessiveness is desire that has lost its generosity. Example: his possessiveness about the idea made it impossible for anyone else to contribute to it. The project suffered as a result. Repeat. Possessive. Word 95. Envy. Definition: a feeling of discontented or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions or qualities. What it captures: desire complicated by another's having, the particular pain of wanting what someone else has and knowing that they have it. Envy is different from jealousy in that jealousy fears losing what you have, while envy resents what you do not. Example: the envy was specific and uncomfortable. It was not his success she envied, but the ease with which he seemed to carry it. Repeat. Envy. Word 96. Drawn. Definition: attracted to something or someone. What it captures: desire experienced as pull, the sense of being moved toward something by a force that does not require justification. To be drawn to something is to feel its gravitational quality. Example: she was drawn to the work for reasons she could not entirely explain. Something in it corresponded to something in her. Repeat. Drawn. Word 97. Insatiable. Definition: impossible to satisfy. What it captures: desire that cannot be fully answered, that returns regardless of how much is given to it. An insatiable desire is one that has no natural endpoint, no moment at which it will rest. Example: her insatiable curiosity was both her greatest professional asset and the most exhausting thing about being her. Repeat. Insatiable. Word 98. Impulse. Definition: a sudden, strong, and unreflective urge or desire to act. What it captures: desire that arrives so quickly and so fully that it precedes thought. An impulse is not considered. It simply arrives and asks to be acted on. Some impulses are generous, some are not. The difficulty is not always knowing which is which. Example: the impulse to say something kind was so immediate that she had already said it before she had decided to. Repeat. Impulse. Word 99. Pining. Definition: yearning and weakening through desire or longing. What it captures: desire that is causing suffering. Wanting that has reached a level of intensity where it is actually diminishing the person who feels it. To pine is to be made thinner by what you want. Example: she was still pining for the version of events she had hoped for. Letting go of what she had wanted felt like a second loss. Repeat. Pining. Word 100. Unrequited. Definition: not returned or rewarded. What it captures: desire that has no answering desire. Love or longing that is given without being received. Unrequited feeling is one of the most poignant human experiences because it involves the full intensity of wanting alongside the absolute absence of response. Example: the unrequited admiration was something she had carried quietly for years. She had never said it, and now she no longer needed to. Repeat. Unrequited. 100 words. 4 categories complete. We are a third of the way through this masterclass. Let us continue into the words of regret, hope, doubt, obsession, grief, wonder, the unconscious, and clarity. Category 5. Words of regret. These 25 words describe the experience of looking back with pain. The many different ways the mind relates to what was done, not done, said, unsaid, chosen, or refused. Word 101. Remorse. Definition: deep regret or guilt for a wrong committed. What it captures: regret that is specifically about having done something harmful. Not just sadness that things turned out badly, but the moral weight of having caused something that should not have been caused. Remorse is regret with responsibility in it. Example: the remorse arrived gradually. which almost made it worse. The understanding of what he had done came in stages, each more complete than the last. Repeat. Remorse. Word 102. Rue. Definition. To bitterly regret. What it captures. One of the oldest and most compact words in English for regret. Direct, simple, and carrying a slightly archaic weight that makes it feel more serious than the modern regret. To rue something is to feel it in a deep and lasting way. Example, she rued the decision for years without being able to change it, which is the particular cruelty of regret. Repeat. Rue. Word 103. Wince. Definition. To give a slight involuntary grimace as an expression of pain or embarrassment. What it captures. Regret expressed physically. The body's response to remembering something painful or embarrassing. A wince is regret made visible, the inner experience briefly showing on the outer face. Example, she winced every time the memory surfaced. There was no getting used to it. Repeat. Wince. Word 104. Reproach. Definition. The expression of disapproval or disappointment. To express disapproval to someone. What it captures. Regret directed outward toward another person. Not internal guilt, but the communication of disappointment or judgment. Reproach can be gentle or harsh. It is always a naming of failure. Example. He felt the reproach in her silence more acutely than he would have felt it in words. Repeat. Reproach. Word 105. Contrite. Definition. Feeling or expressing remorse at the recognition of one's wrongdoing. What it captures. Regret that has become fully conscious and expressed. The state of being genuinely sorry for what you have done. A contrite person is not just regretful, but is moved to change by their regret. Example. The apology was contrite in a way that made it credible. She believed it because it cost him something to say. Repeat. Contrite. Word 106. Wistful. Definition. Having or showing a feeling of vague or regretful longing. What it captures. Regret at its gentlest. Not the sharp pain of remorse, but the soft ache of things that did not happen. Choices not made. Paths not taken. Wistful regret has accepted its object while still feeling it. Example. She was wistful rather than bitter, which took more courage than bitterness would have. Repeat. Wistful. Word 107. Lament. Definition. To express passionate grief about. A passionate expression of grief or sorrow. What it captures. Regret at its most expressed. Turned into voice, into words, into sound. To lament is to give regret its full external form. The word carries an ancient quality. The lament is one of the oldest forms of human expression. Example. He lamented the missed opportunity not once, but consistently, which was itself a kind of self-punishment. Repeat. Lament. Word 108. Penitent. Definition. Feeling or showing sorrow and regret for having done wrong. Repentant. What it captures. Regret in its most active form. the state of someone who has done wrong and is genuinely committed to being different. Penitence is not just feeling bad, but being moved to change. Example: she arrived at the meeting in a penitent frame of mind that was unusual enough to be noticed. Repeat. Penitent. Word 109. Chagrin. Definition: distress or embarrassment at having failed or been humiliated. What it captures: regret mixed with embarrassment. The particular pain of having failed in a way that others can see. Chagrin is regret made social. Example: much to her chagrin, the mistake had been noticed before she had a chance to correct it. Repeat. Chagrin. Word 110. Revisit. Definition: to visit again. To consider again. What it captures: the mental habit of returning to past events, decisions, or conversations, going over them again as if revision were possible. To revisit a decision is to sit with regret long enough to see it from different angles. Example: she revisited the conversation regularly, each time finding new things she should have said or should not have. Repeat. Revisit. Word 111. Second guess. Definition: to criticize or question a decision after the fact. What it captures: regret applied analytically, going back over a decision and imagining the alternative. Second guessing is the mind's way of refusing to accept that choices cannot be undone. Example: he second guessed the decision for months. The alternative he kept imagining was not necessarily better, it was simply different, and difference felt like possibility. Repeat. Second guess. Word 112. Atone. Definition: to make amends for a wrongdoing. What it captures: the active response to regret, not just feeling sorry, but doing something to repair the damage. Atonement is regret in motion, regret that has found a way to be useful. Example: he spent years trying to atone for decisions made in haste during a period he did not want to revisit. The atonement itself became a kind of purpose. Repeat. Atone. Word 113. Hindsight. Definition: understanding of a situation or event only after it has happened or developed. What it captures: the perspective that regret produces, seeing clearly, from after the fact, what was not clear at the time. Hindsight is always accurate because it knows the ending. This makes it both valuable and unfair as a form of judgment. Example: in hindsight, the signals were everywhere. At the time, none of them had seemed significant enough to act on. Repeat. Hindsight. Word 114. Irreversible. Definition: not able to be undone or altered. What it captures: the specific quality of certain regrets, the ones attached to things that cannot be changed. The irreversibility of a mistake is part of what makes regret painful. If it could be undone, it would not be regret, but simply a problem. Example: she had made irreversible decisions with imperfect information, which is the condition of every significant choice. Repeat. Irreversible. Word 115. Culpable. Definition: responsible for a fault or wrong, deserving blame. What it captures: regret grounded in responsibility, The recognition that you had agency in what happened, and that agency matters. To feel culpable is to accept that the outcome was not simply bad fortune, but involved your choices. Example: she felt culpable in ways she was not entirely sure were accurate. The line between responsibility and excessive self-blame was not always visible. Repeat. Culpable. Word 116. Agonize. Definition: to undergo great mental anguish through worrying about something. What it captures: regret at its most painful and active. Not passive sadness, but the sustained, effortful suffering of a mind that cannot accept or let go of what has happened. Example: she agonized over the wording of the letter for 3 days. By the time she sent it, she was no longer sure what she had originally meant to say. Repeat. Agonize. Word 117. Torment. Definition: severe physical or mental suffering. To cause to experience great mental suffering. What it captures: regret at its most intense. Not just pain, but the active, relentless quality of suffering that does not rest. To be tormented by something is to be in a state of sustained, inescapable distress. Example: the memory tormented him, not because of what had happened, but because of what he had not done when he could. Repeat. Torment. Word 118. Reconcile. Definition: to restore friendly relations, to make compatible, to come to accept. What it captures: the resolution of regret, the process of coming to terms with what happened, finding a way to hold it that does not cause ongoing pain. To reconcile yourself to something is to make peace with it. Example: she was still working on reconciling herself to the outcome. Peace would come. It was not here yet. Repeat. Reconcile. Word 119. Unfulfilled. Definition: not carrying out or achieving what was desired or intended. What it captures: regret directed toward potential rather than action. The particular pain of having had more to give than was given, more to become than was become. Unfulfilled regret is the sadness of unrealized possibility. Example: there was a persistent sense of the unfulfilled in the way he spoke about his early career. Something had been possible that had not been pursued. Repeat. Unfulfilled. Word 120. Reparation. Definition: the action of making amends for a wrong. Money paid as an apology or as compensation. What it captures: the practical expression of regret, the attempt to restore something that was damaged or taken. Reparation acknowledges both the wrong and the possibility of at least partial repair. Example: no reparation was fully adequate to what had happened. She made it anyway, because inadequate repair is still repair. Repeat. Reparation. Word 121. Bitter. Definition: having a sharp, pungent taste or smell, not sweet. Feeling or showing anger, hurt, or resentment. What it captures: regret that has curdled into resentment, turning from sorrow at what happened into anger at the people or circumstances involved. Bitterness is regret that has stopped looking inward and started looking outward. Example: he had managed to avoid becoming bitter about it, which required more active effort than it appeared. Repeat. Bitter. Word 122. Dwell. Definition: to live somewhere, To think, speak, or write at length about a subject. What it captures. The habit of staying too long in a regret, returning to it repeatedly, giving it more time and attention than is useful. To dwell on something is to remain in it past the point where remaining is productive. Example: she tried not to dwell on what might have been different. The dwelling itself changed nothing and cost everything. Repeat. Dwell. Word 1, 2, 3. Resignation. Definition: the acceptance of something undesirable but inevitable. What it captures. Regret that has reached its final stage. Acceptance of what cannot be changed. Resignation is not defeat. It is the peace that comes from stopping the fight against what is already done. Example: there was a quiet resignation in the way she spoke about the choice she had made. Not happiness, but peace. Repeat. Resignation. Word 124. Accountability. Definition: the fact or condition of being responsible to others. What it captures. Regret grounded in a relationship to others. The recognition that what you did affected people who deserved better, and that this creates an obligation. Accountability is regret that has found its ethical form. Example: she valued accountability in a world where it was increasingly rare. This included holding herself to the same standard. Repeat. Accountability. Word 125. Redemption. Definition: the action of being saved from sin, error, or evil. The action of regaining possession of something in exchange for payment. What it captures. The possibility that exists on the other side of regret. That something good can be made from what went wrong. Redemption is the story that regret sometimes finds for itself when it is willing to keep working. Example: he did not use the word redemption, but that was what the last 20 years had been about. He had found a way to make the wrong into something. Repeat. Redemption. 125 words. 5 complete categories. We are just past the halfway point of this masterclass. Let us push into the second half. Category 6. Words of hope. These 25 words describe the experience of believing in what has not yet happened. The many forms that forward-looking trust and expectation take in the human mind. Word 126. Optimism. Definition: hopefulness and confidence about the future or the successful outcome of something. What it captures. A general orientation toward the future. The tendency to expect good outcomes, to believe that things will go well. Optimism is hope as a character trait rather than a response to a specific situation. Example: her optimism was not naive, but was maintained through active effort. She worked at it every day. Repeat. Optimism. Word 127. Anticipation. Definition: the action of anticipating. Expectation or prediction. What it captures. Hope directed toward a specific future event. The pleasurable tension of expecting something good. Anticipation is not passive waiting, but active. Pleasurable engagement with what is coming. Example: the anticipation was almost as good as the thing itself. She had learned to appreciate it rather than hurry through it. Repeat. Anticipation. Word 128. Aspire. Definition: to direct one's hopes and ambitions toward achieving something. What it captures. Hope that is active and goal-directed, not just expecting good things, but working toward them. To aspire is to want upward, to reach. Example: she aspired to be the kind of person who could hold difficulty with grace. She was not yet that person. The aspiration was doing something. Repeat. Aspire. Word 129. Buoyant. Definition: able or tending to keep afloat. Cheerful and optimistic. What it captures: hope as a physical quality, the lightness that comes from confidence in positive outcomes. A buoyant person moves through the world with an upward quality, as if hope itself is making them lighter. Example: she was in a buoyant mood that was impossible to attribute to any single cause. Something in the alignment of things felt right. Repeat. Buoyant. Word 130. Incipient. Definition: in an initial stage, beginning to happen or develop. What it captures: hope at its earliest, the first signs of something that might become more. Incipient hope is the hope that is not yet sure of itself, that is only just emerging. Example: there was an incipient possibility in the conversation that neither of them wanted to name too quickly. Repeat. Incipient. Word 131. Earnest. Definition: resulting from or showing sincere and intense conviction. What it captures: hope that is genuine and committed, not performed or casual, but deeply meant. An earnest hope is one that has full sincerity behind it. Example: she spoke with an earnestness about what the project might become that made it impossible to dismiss. Repeat. Earnest. Word 132. Resilient. Definition: able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. What it captures: hope that survives difficulty, the capacity to maintain belief in positive outcomes even after negative experiences. Resilient hope has been tested and has continued. Example: her resilience was not the absence of being affected, but the capacity to be affected and continue. Repeat. Resilient. Word 133. Tentative. Definition: not certain or fixed, provisional, done without confidence, hesitant. What it captures: hope that is not yet sure of itself, present but careful, reaching but uncertain whether it is safe to reach. Tentative hope is the first small bud of expectation in an environment that has previously disappointed. Example: she allowed herself a tentative hope that things might be different this time. She was careful not to let it grow too large too quickly. Repeat. Tentative. Word 134. Sanguine. Definition: optimistic or positive, especially in a difficult situation. What it captures: hope maintained in the face of adversity. The particular form of optimism that persists not because the situation warrants it, but because the person has decided to maintain it. Sanguine hope is deliberate. Example: she remained sanguine about the outcome in a way that surprised everyone who knew how difficult the situation actually was. Repeat. Sanguine. Word 135. Unflinching. Definition: not weak or hesitant, resolute. What it captures: hope that does not look away from difficulty, the form of forward-looking belief that is not diminished by honest acknowledgement of what it is up against. Unflinching hope is not naive. It has looked at the obstacle directly. Example: the unflinching commitment to the work survived every setback, which eventually made the setbacks matter less. Repeat. Unflinching. Word 136. Invest. Definition: to put money into something for profit. To devote one's time, effort, or energy to a particular undertaking with the expectation of a worthwhile result. What it captures: hope made active. Putting your resources, energy, or attention into something because you believe it will produce something worthwhile. To invest is to act from hope rather than certainty. Example: she invested in the relationship with the full knowledge that investment does not guarantee return. She invested anyway. Repeat. Invest. Word 137. Harbinger. Definition: a person or thing that announces or signals the approach of another. What it captures: a sign of hope. Something that precedes and predicts a better thing to come. A harbinger of hope is the small signal that something good is on its way before it has fully arrived. Example: the first small signs of improvement felt like harbingers of something more substantial to come. Repeat. Harbinger. Word 138. Nascent. Definition: just coming into existence and beginning to display signs of future potential. What it captures: hope at its most delicate and new. The early stage of something that might become significant. Nascent hope is fragile because it is young. It needs care rather than pressure. Example: there was a nascent quality to the collaboration, something just beginning to find its shape. It needed time. Repeat. Nascent. Word 139. Galvanize. Definition: shock or excite someone into taking action. What it captures: the energizing effect of hope, the way that belief in a positive outcome can move people from inertia to action. To be galvanized by hope is to be activated by it. Example: the news galvanized the entire team in a way that months of meetings had not managed to do. Repeat. Galvanize. Word 140. Persevere. Definition: to continue in a course of action even in the face of difficulty or with little or no indication of success. What it captures: hope expressed through action, the willingness to continue working towards something despite evidence that might justify stopping. Perseverance is hope under pressure, choosing to continue. Example: she persevered through a period during which almost everything argued for stopping. Later, she could not always articulate why she had not stopped. Repeat. Persevere. Word 141. Redemptive. Definition: having the ability to save or compensate for the faults or bad aspects of something. What it captures: hope that is specifically about recovery, the possibility that something good can come from or through something bad. Redemptive hope does not deny difficulty, but looks for what it might produce. Example: the experience was not pleasant, but it had a redemptive quality in retrospect. It had changed something important. Repeat. Redemptive. Word 142. Illuminate. Definition: to light up, to help to clarify or explain. What it captures: hope as a source of light, the way that expectation or belief in good outcomes can make the path forward visible when it was previously dark. Example: a single conversation illuminated what months of effort had not managed to clarify. Sometimes hope arrives in the form of a person. Repeat. Illuminate. Word 143. Fledgling. Definition: a young bird that has just fledged, a person or organization that is immature or inexperienced. What it captures: hope in its earliest and most vulnerable stage, present but not yet strong, requiring protection and time before it can sustain itself. Example: the fledgling belief that things could change was too new to survive much pressure. She protected it carefully until it was stronger. Repeat. Fledgling. Word 144. Steadfast. Definition: resolutely or dutifully firm and unwavering. What it captures: hope that has become a form of loyalty, a commitment to positive belief that is not moved by difficulty. Steadfast hope is the kind that other people can rely on. Example: her steadfast belief in the project sustained the whole team during the period when nobody else was sure. Repeat. Steadfast. Word 145. Flourish. Definition: to grow or develop in a healthy or vigorous way, a bold or extravagant gesture or action. What it captures: hope fulfilled, the vision of what positive outcomes actually look like when they arrive. To flourish is the state that hope reaches toward. Example: the idea that had seemed fragile 6 months ago was beginning to flourish in ways that exceeded what they had hoped. Repeat. Flourish. Word 146. Propitious. Definition: giving or indicating a good chance of success. Favorable. What it captures: hope grounded in circumstances, the sense that the conditions are right for something good. Propitious hope has external confirmation. The world seems to be cooperating. Example: the timing seemed propitious in a way that earlier attempts had not. Something in the alignment of things was right. Repeat. Propitious. Word 147. Spark. Definition: a small fiery particle thrown from a fire. A trace of a specified quality. A glimmer of hope. What it captures: hope at its smallest and most powerful. The tiny thing that can start a much larger process. A spark of hope is both minimal and potentially transformative. Example: there was just enough of a spark to keep going. Sometimes that is all that is needed. Just enough. Repeat. Spark. Word 148. Bloom. Definition: a flower, especially one cultivated for its beauty. To produce flowers. To flourish. What it captures: hope finding its full expression. The opening of something that has been developing quietly into its complete and visible form. To bloom is the moment of arrival after the long preparation. Example: The confidence that had been growing carefully for 2 years had finally begun to bloom in a way that others could see. Repeat. Bloom. Word 149. Tenacious. Definition. Tending to keep a firm hold of something, not easily discouraged. What it captures. Hope as a quality of grip. The refusal to let go of belief in positive outcomes despite circumstances that argue for releasing it. Tenacious hope holds on. Example. Her tenacious hope was not cheerful and was not naive. It was simply a refusal to accept that the current situation was permanent. Repeat. Tenacious. Word 150. Renewal. Definition. The action of extending the period of validity of a license, subscription, or contract. The replacing of something that has been consumed. What it captures. Hope as the experience of beginning again. The sense that what was depleted or damaged can be restored, that what has ended can start fresh. Example. The season change always brought a sense of renewal that was not entirely rational, but was entirely real. Repeat. Renewal. 150 words, 6 categories complete. Let us move through doubt, obsession, grief, wonder, the unconscious, and clarity to complete this masterclass. Category 7. Words of doubt. These 25 words describe the experience of uncertainty, the mind suspended between possibilities, unable to commit, questioning what it previously believed. Word 151. Ambivalence. Definition. The coexistence of opposing attitudes or feelings toward a person or thing. What it captures. The experience of genuinely feeling two contradictory things at the same time. Not confused, but double. To be ambivalent is not to not know what you feel. It is to feel both things with equal reality. Example. Her ambivalence about leaving was complete. She wanted to go completely. She wanted to stay completely. Both were true. Repeat. Ambivalence. Word 152. Vacillate. Definition. To waver between different opinions or actions. Be indecisive. What it captures. Doubt expressed through movement. Swinging back and forth between positions rather than holding any one steadily. To vacillate is to be in motion around a decision rather than settled in one. Example. He vacillated for months before finally making the call. The vacillation itself had cost something. Repeat. Vacillate. Word 153. Skeptical. Definition. Not easily convinced. Having doubts or reservations. What it captures. Doubt as a disposition. The habit of not accepting claims without evidence. Of testing rather than trusting. Skepticism is a valuable form of doubt when it is honest and not defensive. Example. She was deeply skeptical of the proposal, not from cynicism, but from experience. Repeat. Skeptical. Word 154. Tentative. Definition. Not certain or fixed. Provisional. Done without confidence. Hesitant. What it captures. Doubt in action. Moving forward without full conviction. Holding a position lightly. Ready to revise. A tentative conclusion is one that has been reached provisionally. Example: she held a tentative view that might or might not survive exposure to more evidence. Repeat. Tentative. Word 155. Equivocal. Definition: open to more than one interpretation. Ambiguous. What it captures: the quality of things that do not resolve into clear meaning. Evidence, statements, behavior that could be read either way. The equivocal is the object of doubt rather than the doubt itself. Example: his response was equivocal in a way that told her everything and nothing simultaneously. Repeat. Equivocal. Word 156. Hesitation. Definition: the action of pausing or being slow before saying or doing something. What it captures: doubt expressed through timing. The pause before action or speech that reveals an inner uncertainty. Hesitation is visible doubt, the body showing what the mind is doing. Example: the hesitation before she answered was brief but noticeable. Something in the question had landed somewhere complicated. Repeat. Hesitation. Word 157. Waver. Definition: to move quaveringly, to begin to weaken or give way, to be irresolute. What it captures: doubt that has begun to affect a previously held position, confidence that is starting to wobble without having entirely collapsed. To waver is to remain standing while beginning to move. Example: she had not wavered from the decision until that conversation. Something in what he said had moved her. Repeat. Waver. Word 158. Cynicism. Definition: an inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest. What it captures: doubt hardened into expectation. Not just questioning whether something is true, but having already concluded that the worst interpretation is correct. Cynicism is doubt that has lost its openness. Example: the cynicism was understandable given what had happened. It was also limiting in ways she was starting to recognize. Repeat. Cynicism. Word 159. Misgiving. Definition: a feeling of doubt or apprehension about the outcome of something. What it captures: doubt with an emotional quality. Not just intellectual uncertainty, but a sense that something is not quite right. A misgiving is a doubt that has a feeling attached to it. Example: she had misgivings about the decision that she could not entirely articulate. The feeling was there without the analysis. Repeat. Misgiving. Word 160. Inconclusive. Definition: not leading to a firm conclusion, not ending doubt or dispute. What it captures: the quality of situations or evidence that leave doubt intact, that do not resolve into certainty. When the evidence is inconclusive, the doubt must remain. Example: the evidence was inconclusive in a way that felt frustrating to everyone who wanted a clear answer. Repeat. Inconclusive. Word 161. Reservation. Definition: a feeling of doubt about the worth or truth of something. What it captures: doubt held carefully. A concern or qualification that prevents full commitment. To have reservations is to withhold complete endorsement while not necessarily opposing. Example: She agreed to proceed, but with significant reservations that she wanted on record. Repeat. Reservation. Word 162. Perplexed. Definition. Unable to understand something. Baffled. What it captures. Doubt arising from incomprehension. Not knowing which interpretation is correct because the situation itself is genuinely difficult to understand. Example. She was perplexed by the reaction and spent the evening trying to find an interpretation that made sense of it. Repeat. Perplexed. Word 163. Falter. Definition. To start to lose strength or momentum. To speak hesitatingly. What it captures. Doubt that has begun to show in performance. The moment when uncertainty causes stumbling rather than thought. To falter is to have doubt become visible in what you are doing. Example. Her confidence faltered when the questions became more specific. She had not anticipated that level of detail. Repeat. Falter. Word 164. Provisional. Definition. Arranged or existing for the present, possibly to be changed later. What it captures. Doubt built into a position. Holding a view or making an arrangement that is understood to be temporary and subject to revision as more information arrives. Example. The agreement was provisional in a way that everyone understood would require revisiting. Repeat. Provisional. Word 165. Quandary. Definition. A state of perplexity or uncertainty over what to do in a difficult situation. What it captures. Doubt at the level of action. Not just uncertain about what is true, but uncertain about what to do. A quandary is the doubt of someone who has to choose. Example. She was in a genuine quandary about which path to take, which was unusual for someone who normally knew her own mind. Repeat. Quandary. Word 166. Contradiction. Definition. A combination of statements, ideas, or features which are opposed to one another. What it captures. The source of doubt, when two things that should be consistent are not, when the evidence points in two different directions, when a person or situation is not what it claimed to be. Example. The contradiction between what he said and how he behaved was too consistent to be accidental. Repeat. Contradiction. Word 167. Suspended. Definition. Temporarily prevented from continuing or being in force or effect. What it captures. Doubt as a state of waiting. Judgment temporarily withheld while more information is gathered or while the situation resolves. Suspended judgment is wise doubt. Example. She held the question in a state of suspended judgment. The answer was not yet available, and she would not pretend it was. Repeat. Suspended. Word 168. Precarious. Definition. Not securely held or in position. Dangerously likely to fall or collapse. What it captures. The fragile quality of a position held without sufficient certainty. A belief or arrangement that depends on things remaining as they are, that could collapse with any change. Example. Her confidence in the plan was precarious, and she knew it. One bad piece of news would undo it. Repeat. Precarious. Word 169. Revisable. Definition: able to be revised or changed. What it captures: doubt as an epistemic virtue, the recognition that a position should be held lightly enough to change if better evidence arrives. Revisable belief is honest belief. Example: she held all her views as revisable, which made her both intellectually trustworthy and occasionally difficult to commit to a position. Repeat. Revisable. Word 170. Liminal. Definition: relating to a transitional or initial stage of a process, occupying a position at a boundary. What it captures: doubt as a location, the space between certainties, the threshold where one thing has ended and another has not yet begun. A liminal state is one of productive doubt. Example: the weeks between leaving the old job and starting the new one were liminal in a way she found both uncomfortable and strangely alive. Repeat. Liminal. Word 171. Tenterhooks. Definition: a state of suspense or tension. What it captures: doubt as a physical state, the anxious uncertainty of waiting for an outcome that has not yet arrived. On tenterhooks is the experience of doubt stretched to its most uncomfortable. Example: she was on tenterhooks for the 3 days before the result came through. The waiting was worse than almost any outcome could have been. Repeat. Tenterhooks. Word 172. Erosion. Definition: the gradual destruction or diminution of something. What it captures: doubt that builds gradually, confidence eroded by repeated small failures or inconsistencies, until what was solid has been significantly reduced. Example: the erosion of trust happened so slowly that neither of them noticed how much had gone until very little remained. Repeat. Erosion. Word 173. Agnostic. Definition: a person who believes it is impossible to know whether God exists. A person who is uncertain about a particular thing. What it captures: the intellectual position of remaining in doubt, deliberately choosing not to commit to a certainty that the evidence does not support. Agnosticism is principled doubt. Example: she was genuinely agnostic about the question, which frustrated people who expected a clear position. Repeat. Agnostic. Word 174. Contingent. Definition: subject to chance, occurring or existing only if certain circumstances are the case. What it captures: doubt built into planning, the recognition that outcomes depend on conditions that are not guaranteed. Contingent thinking is thinking that holds its certainty lightly. Example: her plans were highly contingent on factors outside her control, which she acknowledged without letting it stop her. Repeat. Contingent. Word 175. Rethink. Definition: to think about something again in order to consider changing one's views. What it captures: doubt becoming productive, using uncertainty as the prompt to reconsider, to go back over something with fresh eyes. A rethink is doubt doing useful work. Example: the conversation forced a rethink of everything she had previously assumed about the situation. Repeat. Rethink. 175 words. 7 categories done. Let us move through the remaining 5 categories to complete our 300 words for the inner life. Category 8. Words of wonder. These 25 words describe the experience of being genuinely astonished, the many ways the mind responds to what exceeds its ordinary expectations. Word 176. Awe. Definition: a feeling of reverential respect mixed with fear or wonder. What it captures: wonder at its most complete and most humbling. The experience of something so large or so beautiful or so powerful that the self feels small in a way that is not diminishing, but clarifying. Awe is one of the most powerful and most human emotions. Example: the view from the summit produced a genuine awe that she had not expected. She had thought she was above being moved by landscapes. Repeat. Awe. Word 177. Marvel. Definition: to be filled with wonder or astonishment. A wonderful or astonishing person or thing. What it captures: wonder that is active. To marvel is to be engaged in the experience of astonishment, not just to feel it. The word carries a sense of pleasure and active appreciation. Example: she marveled at the fact that it had all worked out. The probability of it had seemed so low. Repeat. Marvel. Word 178. Stupefied. Definition: dazed and unable to think clearly. Astonished greatly. What it captures: wonder so strong that it disrupts normal cognitive function. The astonishment that leaves the mind temporarily unable to process what it has encountered. Stupefied wonder is overwhelming. Example: she stood stupefied by the news for several seconds before any response became possible. Repeat. Stupefied. Word 179. Rapturous. Definition: feeling or expressing great pleasure or enthusiasm. What it captures: wonder expressed outwardly. The state of being so moved by something that the feeling shows completely in the body and the face. Rapture is wonder that has become physical. Example: the audience's rapturous response was not what she had allowed herself to expect. She had not prepared for it. Repeat. Rapturous. Word 180. Sublime. Definition: of such excellence, grandeur, or beauty as to inspire great admiration. What it captures: the particular quality of wonder that is produced by greatness, not just the beautiful, but the overwhelmingly beautiful, the thing that exceeds ordinary categories of appreciation. The sublime is wonder's highest register. Example: the music reached something she could only call the sublime, a quality beyond analysis, beyond preference, beyond any ordinary response. Repeat. Sublime. Word 181. Transcendent. Definition: beyond or above the range of normal or purely physical human experience. What it captures: wonder that has moved into a domain beyond the ordinary. The experience of something that feels as if it exceeds the limitations of normal consciousness. Transcendent wonder is the wonder of contact with something beyond the everyday. Example: there were moments in the performance that felt genuinely transcendent. The music became something larger than music. Repeat. transcendent. Word 182, reverence. Definition: deep respect for someone or something. What it captures: wonder that has organized itself into ongoing respect. The sustained attitude towards something extraordinary that continues after the initial astonishment has passed. Reverence is wonder that has become a relationship. Example: she approached the archive with reverence. These were not just documents. They were the traces of lives. Repeat. Reverence. Word 183, luminous. Definition: emitting light, especially self-generated light. Very intelligent or enlightened. What it captures: wonder at the quality of illumination, something so clear or so beautiful that it seems to produce its own light. Luminous describes wonder's response to things that make other things visible. Example: the description was luminous in a way that made the thing it was describing suddenly legible. Repeat. Luminous. Word 184, dazzled. Definition: to cause to lose clear vision, especially from intense light. To amaze or overwhelm. What it captures: wonder that temporarily impairs normal function. Being so affected by something that clarity is briefly lost. To be dazzled is to have wonder exceed the mind's capacity to process what is producing it. Example: she was dazzled by the scope of what he described, not quite able to hold the whole of it at once. Repeat. Dazzled. Word 185, incredulity. Definition: the state of being unwilling or unable to believe something. What it captures: wonder mixed with the resistance to accepting what is astonishing. The state of being so surprised that the mind temporarily refuses to accept what has happened, even as it is happening. Example: the incredulity lasted about 30 seconds before reality asserted itself. Something extraordinary had happened, and it was real. Repeat. Incredulity. Word 186, ineffable. Definition: too great or extreme to be expressed in words. What it captures: wonder at the limit of language. The experience of something so profound or beautiful that words cannot adequately contain it. Ineffable wonder is the wonder that knows its own inadequacy. Example: the experience was ineffable in the precise sense of the word. She tried to describe it for months and always felt she had missed the center of it. Repeat. Ineffable. Word 187, enchanted. Definition: filled with delight, charmed, under a magic spell. What it captures: wonder as a spell. The state of being held by something in a way that feels almost magical, in which ordinary perception has been replaced by a heightened, transformed way of seeing. Example: she was enchanted by the city in a way that she knew would not last forever, but wanted to make last as long as possible. Repeat. Enchanted. Word 188, staggering. Definition: causing great astonishment or amazement. What it captures: wonder at scale. Astonishment produced by something so large or so extreme that the mind is genuinely destabilized by it. A staggering fact or event is one that the mind must readjust to accommodate. Example: the staggering ambition of the project was either inspiring or alarming, depending on who was looking at it. Repeat. Staggering. Word 189. Gobsmacked. Definition: utterly astonished. What it captures: the most informal and most expressive word for complete astonishment. Wonder that has removed the capacity for speech. The image is of something hitting the mouth closed. Example: she was absolutely gobsmacked. She had not prepared for this possibility and had no response ready. Repeat. Gobsmacked. Word 190. Resplendent. Definition: attractive and impressive through being richly colorful or sumptuous. What it captures: wonder at beauty that demands attention. Something so visually magnificent that the response is something close to awe. Resplendent things do not allow for indifference. Example: the garden in full bloom was resplendent in a way that made it hard to know where to look first. Repeat. Resplendent. Word 191. Epiphany. Definition: a moment of sudden and great revelation or realization. What it captures: wonder at the level of understanding. The astonishment of a sudden insight that changes how things look. An epiphany is the wonder of the mind catching up with something that was there all along. Example: the epiphany was not dramatic from the outside. She simply stopped walking and stood still for a moment because something had become clear. Repeat. Epiphany. Word 192. Profound. Definition: very great or intense. Having or showing great knowledge or insight. What it captures: wonder at depth. The experience of something that goes far below the surface into something essential and significant. Profound things produce wonder because they reach something real. Example: the book had a profound effect that she could feel, but not entirely describe. Something had changed in how she thought. Repeat. Profound. Word 193. Radiant. Definition: sending out light, shining or glowing brightly, clearly emanating great joy. What it captures: wonder expressed outwardly, the visible evidence of an inner state of astonishment or joy. Something radiant shares its quality with the space around it. Example: she was radiant in a way that told everyone in the room that something good had happened without any of them knowing what. Repeat. Radiant. Word 194. Serendipity. Definition: the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way. What it captures: wonder at the unexpected gift, the astonishment at finding something valuable in a place and moment where you were not looking for it. Serendipity is wonder at good fortune. Example: the whole collaboration had begun through serendipity. Nobody had planned it. It simply happened and turned out to be exactly right. Repeat. Serendipity. Word 195. Astonished. Definition: greatly surprised or impressed. What it captures: the most direct and neutral word for wonder. the state of having been surprised beyond ordinary expectation. Astonishment is wonder without the additional layers of reverence or enchantment. Example: she was astonished by how quickly it had all happened. A year ago, none of this had existed. Repeat. Astonished. Word 196. Illuminate. Definition: light up, help to clarify or explain. What it captures: wonder at sudden understanding, the experience of something becoming visible that was previously in darkness. To be illuminated is to have wonder produce new sight. Example: a single question illuminated the whole conversation. Everything she had been trying to understand became clear at once. Repeat. Illuminate. Word 197. Flabbergasted. Definition: informal for greatly astonished. What it captures: informal and wonderfully vivid, the complete and somewhat helpless astonishment that leaves a person unable to construct a composed response. Flabbergasted is being so surprised it shows everywhere at once. Example: she was utterly flabbergasted. She had expected something, not this. Repeat. Flabbergasted. Word 198. Majestic. Definition: having or showing impressive beauty or dignity. What it captures: wonder at grandeur, the response to something that has a quality of scale or dignity that exceeds ordinary experience. Majestic things produce awe because they remind us of how much is larger than ourselves. Example: the mountains produced a majestic quality in the air around them that changed how everything felt. Repeat. Majestic. Word 199. Astounded. Definition: shocked or greatly surprised. What it captures: wonder that has a quality of shock in it, astonishment so complete that it is initially destabilizing. To be astounded is to have your expectations so thoroughly exceeded that the ordinary frame of reference is temporarily disrupted. Example: she was astounded by the response. She had not believed this many people cared enough to come. Repeat. Astounded. Word 200. Wondrous. Definition: inspiring a feeling of wonder or delight. Marvelous. What it captures: the adjective of wonder itself, describing the quality of things that produce it. Something wondrous is something that cannot be encountered without astonishment. Example: the world, approached in the right frame of mind, is genuinely wondrous. The difficulty is maintaining the right frame of mind. Repeat. Wondrous. 200 words. 8 categories complete. 100 words remaining. Let us finish with the words of the unconscious: obsession, grief, and the extraordinary moment of clarity. Category 9. Words of obsession. These 25 words describe the experience of a thought or feeling that will not leave, that returns unbidden, occupies the foreground, and resists all attempts at release. Word 201. Ruminate. Definition: to think deeply about something, to chew the cud. What it captures: the mind working repeatedly over the same material, returning to a thought or problem or memory again and again without resolution. Rumination is thinking as repetition rather than progress. Example: she ruminated on the conversation for days, finding nothing new each time, but unable to stop returning to it. Repeat. Ruminate. Word 202. Intrusive. Definition. Coming in without invitation or welcome. What it captures. The quality of thoughts that arrive without permission, inserting themselves into consciousness when they are not wanted. Intrusive thoughts are the obsessive ones that bypass the mind's gatekeeping. Example. Intrusive thoughts about the incident kept surfacing during otherwise ordinary moments of the day. Repeat. Intrusive. Word 203. Fixate. Definition. To focus one's gaze intently. To be obsessively interested in something or someone. What it captures. The narrowing of attention to a single point. The mind's refusal to look elsewhere, even when looking elsewhere would serve it better. To fixate is to make one thing the entire field of attention. Example. She fixated on the detail that least mattered and missed the pattern it was part of. Repeat. Fixate. Word 204. Preoccupied. Definition. Engrossed in thought. Distracted. What it captures. The state of being occupied in advance, having mental space taken up by something before the present moment has arrived. A preoccupied person is somewhere else while they are here. Example. She was too preoccupied to fully engage with the meeting. The other conversation, the one in her head, was too loud. Repeat. Preoccupied. Word 205. Relentless. Definition. Oppressively constant, incessant. What it captures. The quality of obsessive thought that does not stop, that continues regardless of the person's wish to stop it. Relentless is the persistence of unwanted thought. Example. The relentless quality of the self-criticism was more exhausting than the original mistake had been. Repeat. Relentless. Word 206. Compulsive. Definition. Resulting from or relating to an irresistible urge to behave in a certain way. What it captures. Obsession that has organized itself into behavior. Thinking that has become action, that is repeated not through choice, but through an irresistible internal pressure. Example. The compulsive checking began as a reasonable precaution and became something she could not control. Repeat. Compulsive. Word 207. Introspect. Definition. To examine one's own thoughts or feelings. What it captures. The directed version of inner attention. Choosing to look at what is happening inside rather than outside. Introspection is the deliberate act of observing the inner life. Example. She introspected on the reaction for longer than was probably productive, but the examination yielded something eventually. Repeat. Introspect. Word 208. Perseverate. Definition. To repeat or prolong an action, thought, or utterance after the stimulus that prompted it has ceased. What it captures. A specific and technical word for the pattern of mental repetition, continuing to think about something after the situation that required the thought has passed. A highly specific and very useful word for a very common inner experience. Example. The mind's tendency to perseverate on a criticism long after it was relevant is one of its least useful features. Repeat. Perseverate. Word 209. Entrenched. Definition. Established so firmly that change is very difficult. What it captures. Obsession that has become structural. A thought or pattern that has been repeated so many times that it has become part of how the mind is organized. Entrenched thoughts are harder to change than ordinary thoughts because they have become the territory. Example: the entrenched belief that she was not good enough had been formed so early that it had become invisible. Repeat. Entrenched. Word 210. Incessant. Definition. Continuing without pause or interruption. What it captures. The temporal quality of obsessive thought. The absence of relief. Incessant describes thought that does not stop for sleep, for distraction, for reason. Example: the incessant noise of the anxiety was more tiring than any physical exertion. Repeat. Incessant. Word 211. Captive. Definition. A person who has been taken prisoner. Kept as prisoner. What it captures. The experience of being held by a thought. Unable to leave it. Unable to direct attention elsewhere. To be captive to an obsession is to be its prisoner. Example: she felt captive to the question in a way that made other thinking almost impossible. Repeat. Captive. Word 212. Cyclical. Definition. Occurring in cycles, regularly recurring. What it captures. The pattern of obsessive thought, returning on a cycle, predictable in its return, varying only in its intensity. Cyclical thinking is thought organized by repetition rather than by progress. Example: the cyclical nature of the anxiety was frustrating precisely because she knew the pattern and could not interrupt it. Repeat. Cyclical. Word 213. Pervasive. Definition. Spreading widely throughout an area or group of people. What it captures. Obsession that has spread through consciousness rather than remaining in one place. Coloring everything rather than occupying a specific corner of the mind. Example: the grief was pervasive in a way that surprised her. She had expected it to be more located. Repeat. Pervasive. Word 214. Torment. Definition. Severe physical or mental suffering. To cause to experience great mental suffering. What it captures. Obsession at its most painful. The suffering that comes from thoughts that cannot be released and that inflict ongoing damage. Example: the unanswered question tormented him, not because the answer mattered practically, but because the not knowing did. Repeat. Torment. Word 215. Introspection. Definition. The examination of one's own thoughts and feelings. What it captures. The practice of turning attention inward, monitoring and understanding one's own mental activity. At its best, introspection is the tool of self-knowledge. At its worst, it becomes another form of rumination. Example: the level of introspection required to understand what had happened was significant. She had been avoiding it. Repeat. Introspection. Word 216. Tenacious. Definition. Not easily relinquished. Persistent. What it captures. The quality of a thought that will not release. that holds on despite the person's desire to let it go. Tenacious thoughts survive all attempts at dislodging them. Example: the memory was tenacious in a way that felt disproportionate to its significance. Repeat: tenacious. Word 217. Spiral. Definition: moving in a continuous curve around a central point, to increase rapidly. What it captures: the self-reinforcing quality of obsessive thought, each repetition generating the conditions for the next, the whole system gaining momentum and becoming harder to interrupt. Example: she recognized the thought spiral beginning and began the deliberate work of interrupting it. This time, she succeeded. Repeat: spiral. Word 218. Absorbed. Definition: intensely involved in something, having been taken in. What it captures: obsession experienced from the inside as complete engagement, the total occupation of attention by a single subject. To be absorbed is to have everything else recede. Example: she was so absorbed in the problem that 3 hours had passed without her noticing. Repeat: absorbed. Word 219. Ingrained. Definition: firmly fixed or established, deep-rooted. What it captures: obsessive thoughts that have become part of the grain of the mind, so deeply embedded that they have become part of the structure rather than a temporary occupant. Example: the ingrained habit of self-criticism operated below the level of conscious thought most of the time. Repeat: ingrained. Word 220. Relive. Definition: to live through or experience something again, especially in the imagination. What it captures: obsession applied to memory, returning not just to the thought of something, but to its felt experience. To relive something is to bring it back into the present with full emotional intensity. Example: she relived the conversation repeatedly, each time noticing something she had missed in the last replay. Repeat: relive. Word 221. Saturate. Definition: to cause something to absorb or dissolve as much of a substance as it can. What it captures: obsession that has filled consciousness completely, leaving no room for other thoughts. To be saturated with a thought is to have it occupy every available space. Example: her thinking was saturated with the problem in a way that made everything else feel thin and distant. Repeat: saturate. Word 222. Hypnotic. Definition: relating to hypnosis, inducing a sleep-like state. Fascinating. What it captures: the quality of an obsessive thought that holds the attention the way a hypnotic object does, producing a trance-like engagement that is hard to break. Example: the repetitive nature of the task was hypnotic in a way that was both helpful and concerning. Repeat: hypnotic. Word 223. Brood. Definition: to think deeply about something that makes one unhappy. What it captures: obsession with a quality of darkness and self-perpetuation, not just thinking, but sitting with difficult thoughts in a sustained, heavy way. Brooding is thinking that has become a mood. Example: he brooded on the injustice of it for far longer than the injustice deserved. He knew this and could not stop. Repeat: brood. Word 224. Unshakable. Definition: not able to be changed or questioned. What it captures: obsession that has become conviction. A thought that has so thoroughly organized the mind around it that challenge feels not just difficult, but impossible. Example: the unshakable belief that she had been wrong was present long before she could explain why. Repeat: unshakable. Word 225, possessed. Definition: having or showing control of a quality or ability, dominated or driven by something. What it captures: obsession at its most complete. The experience of being taken over by a thought or feeling so thoroughly that the person seems to be in its grip rather than their own. Example: there was a quality of being possessed about the way he pursued the project. Something had taken hold. Repeat: possessed. Category 10, words of grief. Word 226, bereaved. Definition: feeling great sadness because someone you love has died. Example: she was bereaved in a way that changed the quality of every ordinary moment. Repeat: bereaved. Word 227, mourning. Definition: the expression of deep sorrow for someone who has died. Example: the mourning took longer than anyone expected, including her. Repeat: mourning. Word 228, desolate. Definition: feeling abandoned or very lonely. Example: the house felt completely desolate after he left. The rooms held his absence more than they held anything else. Repeat: desolate. Word 229, hollow. Definition: having a hole or empty space inside, without significance. Example: the achievement felt hollow when there was nobody to share it with. Repeat: hollow. Word 230, bereft. Definition: lacking something or feeling a great loss. Example: she was bereft in a way she had not anticipated. The absence was larger than the presence had been. Repeat: bereft. Word 231, anguish. Definition: severe mental or physical pain or suffering. Example: the anguish of uncertainty was more difficult than the anguish of knowing would have been. Repeat: anguish. Word 232, elegy. Definition: a mournful poem, especially a lament for the dead. Example: the speech had the quality of an elegy, beautiful and sad and entirely irreversible. Repeat: elegy. Word 233, forlorn. Definition: pitifully sad and abandoned. Example: she looked forlorn in a way that made everyone in the room want to help and nobody know how. Repeat: forlorn. Word 234, inconsolable. Definition: not able to be comforted or alleviated. Example: she was inconsolable for the first week. After that, the grief became more navigable, if never smaller. Repeat: inconsolable. Word 235, elegiac. Definition: relating to or having the quality of an elegy, mournfully beautiful. Example: the letter had an elegiac quality, full of affection for what had been and no bitterness about what had ended. Repeat. Elegiac. Word 236. Wretched. Definition. In a very unhappy or unfortunate state. Example. She felt wretched in a way that the word entirely captured. Not just sad, but diminished, reduced. Repeat. Wretched. Word 237. Distraught. Definition. Very worried and upset. Example. He was distraught when the news arrived. The composure came back slowly and imperfectly. Repeat. Distraught. Word 238. Yearning. Definition. A feeling of intense longing for something. Example. The yearning for the person who was gone had a specific quality. Wanting someone who could not come back. Repeat. Yearning. Word 239. Solace. Definition. Comfort or consolation in a time of distress. Example. Music was the solace that reached her when nothing else could. She played the same pieces for months. Repeat. Solace. Word 240. Requiem. Definition. A special church service for someone who has died. Example. The gathering had the quality of a requiem, not just for the person, but for everything the person had represented. Repeat. Requiem. Word 241. Tender. Definition. Showing gentleness and concern. Example. The grief had made her tender in a way she had not expected, more open, more easily moved. Repeat. Tender. Word 242. Unresolved. Definition. Not settled or concluded. Example. The unresolved grief had a way of surfacing in unrelated moments. Repeat. Unresolved. Word 243. Vestige. Definition. A trace of something that is disappearing or no longer exists. Example. The vestiges of the relationship lingered in objects she had not managed to give away. Repeat. Vestige. Word 244. Permeate. Definition. To spread throughout something. Example. The grief permeated the months after the loss in ways she could not always name. Repeat. Permeate. Word 245. Cathartic. Definition. Providing psychological relief through the expression of strong emotions. Example. The conversation was cathartic in a way she had not expected. Something released. Repeat. Cathartic. Word 246. Subside. Definition. To become less intense, violent, or severe. Example. The acute grief eventually subsided into something chronic and quieter. Repeat. Subside. Word 247. Commemorate. Definition. To recall and show respect for someone or something. Example. She found ways to commemorate the loss that felt true rather than performative. Repeat. Commemorate. Word 248. Absence. Definition. The state of being away from a place or person. Example. The absence was its own presence, a shape in the room that could be felt. Repeat. Absence. Word 249. Integrated. Definition. With various parts working together as a whole. Example. The grief became integrated over time, part of her rather than separate from her. Repeat. Integrated. Word 250. Endure. Definition. To suffer patiently, to remain in existence, to last. Example. She endured the worst of it. That was sometimes the most that could be said. Repeat. Endure. Category 11. Words of the unconscious. Word 251. Subliminal. Definition. Below the threshold of sensation or consciousness. Example. The subliminal fear was present long before she could name it consciously. Repeat. Subliminal. Word 252. Repress. Definition. To suppress in oneself. To put out of one's mind. Example. The repressed memory surfaced eventually in a context she had not prepared for. Repeat. Repress. Word 253. Projection. Definition. The unconscious transfer of one's own feelings to others. Example. The projection was clear once it was named. What she attributed to him was entirely her own. Repeat. Projection. Word 254. Denial. Definition. Refusal to accept or acknowledge something. Example. The denial lasted longer than the evidence warranted. The mind is very creative in this regard. Repeat. Denial. Word 255. Unconscious. Definition. Done or existing without one's awareness. Example. The unconscious assumptions she brought to the relationship had shaped it in ways she could not see at the time. Repeat. Unconscious. Word 256. Implicit. Definition. Implied, though not plainly expressed. Example. The implicit belief that she was not deserving of good things had been operating below awareness for years. Repeat. Implicit. Word 257. Instinct. Definition. An innate, typically fixed pattern of behavior. A natural ability. Example. Her instinct about the situation was accurate, despite the absence of any evidence she could articulate. Repeat. Instinct. Word 258. Internalize. Definition. To make attitudes or behavior part of one's nature by learning or unconscious assimilation. Example. The criticism had been internalized so completely that it no longer sounded like someone else's voice. Repeat. Internalize. Word 259. Conditioned. Definition. Having been subjected to conditioning. Trained. Example. She was conditioned to expect difficulty in a way that made ease feel suspicious. Repeat. Conditioned. Word 260. Latent. Definition. Existing but not yet developed or manifest. Example. The latent capacity for the work had always been there. The right circumstances had finally summoned it. Repeat. Latent. Word 261. Impulsive. Definition: acting or done without forethought. Example: the impulsive decision turned out to be the right one. The careful one had been wrong. Repeat. Impulsive. Word 262. Habituated. Definition: made familiar with something through repeated exposure. Example: she had become habituated to the low-level anxiety in a way that made its absence, on good days, feel strange. Repeat. Habituated. Word 263. Somatic. Definition: relating to the body, especially as distinct from the mind. Example: the emotional response was somatic, felt in the body before the mind had processed what was happening. Repeat. Somatic. Word 264. Primitive. Definition: relating to the earliest development. Basic. Instinctive. Example: the primitive fear response was activating in a situation that did not require it. The body was overestimating the danger. Repeat. Primitive. Word 265. Embedded. Definition: implanted in a surrounding mass, absorbed so as to be an integral part. Example: the belief was so deeply embedded that it had become invisible as a belief. Repeat. Embedded. Word 266. Autonomous. Definition: having the freedom to act independently. Example: much of what the mind does is autonomous, happening without the conscious self directing it. Repeat. Autonomous. Word 267. Preconscious. Definition: in or relating to a part of the mind just below conscious awareness. Example: the preconscious processing had already reached a conclusion by the time she sat down to think about it deliberately. Repeat. Preconscious. Word 268. Pattern. Definition: a repeated decorative design, a regular and intelligible form. Example: she could see the pattern clearly now that she was not in the middle of it. Repeat. Pattern. Word 269. Trigger. Definition: a device that releases a mechanism to cause an event to happen. Example: the trigger was specific and sensory, a smell, a piece of music, a phrase, and it arrived without warning. Repeat. Trigger. Word 270. Dissociate. Definition: to disconnect or become detached from one's thoughts, feelings, or surroundings. Example: under extreme stress, she tended to dissociate, to watch what was happening from a slight distance, as if it were not entirely real. Repeat. Dissociate. Word 271. Automatic. Definition: done or occurring spontaneously, without conscious thought. Example: the response was automatic, produced before she had decided to produce it. Repeat. Automatic. Word 272. Schema. Definition: a representation of a plan or theory in the form of an outline or model. Example: the schema she brought to the relationship determined what she could and could not see within it. Repeat. Schema. Word 273. Default. Definition: a pre-selected option, a failure to fulfill an obligation, to revert to a previous state. Example: her default emotional response to uncertainty was withdrawal, which she was working to change. Repeat. Default. Word 274. Encrypted. Definition: converted into coded form. Example: the meaning of the dream was encrypted in a way that resisted direct interpretation. Repeat. Encrypted. Word 275. Emerge. Definition: to become apparent or come to light, to move out from a place. Example: the understanding emerged slowly, surfacing over weeks rather than arriving in a moment. Repeat. Emerge. Category 12. Words of clarity. These final 25 words describe the moment when confusion resolves, when understanding arrives, when things become clear. Word 276. Lucid. Definition: expressed clearly, easy to understand, showing ability to think clearly. Example: she was most lucid in the early morning, before anything had complicated the day. Repeat. Lucid. Word 277. Crystallize. Definition: to form crystals, to make or become definite and clear. Example: the thought crystallized during the walk. She had not been able to reach it sitting still. Repeat. Crystallize. Word 278. Realize. Definition: to become fully aware of something as a fact, to cause to happen. Example: she realized what had been happening gradually and then all at once. Repeat. Realize. Word 279. Illuminate. Definition: to light up, to help to clarify or explain. Example: a single question illuminated what months of analysis had not managed to reach. Repeat. Illuminate. Word 280. Discern. Definition: to perceive or recognize something. Example: she could discern the pattern once she had enough distance from it. Repeat. Discern. Word 281. Articulate. Definition: able to speak fluently and coherently, to express something clearly. Example: she could finally articulate what she had been feeling for months. The words had arrived. Repeat. Articulate. Word 282. Coherent. Definition: logical and consistent, able to speak clearly. Example: the explanation became coherent once she had stopped trying to make it neat. Repeat. Coherent. Word 283. Epiphany. Definition: a moment of sudden and great revelation. Example: the epiphany came in an ordinary moment, that is usually when they come. Repeat. Epiphany. Word 284. Resolve. Definition: to settle or find a solution to a problem. Firm determination. Example: the question resolved itself without her actively working on it. The unconscious had been working in the background. Repeat. Resolve. Word 285. Transparent. Definition: easy to perceive or detect. Obvious. Example: once she had understood the pattern, her own behavior became transparent in a way she found uncomfortable. Repeat. Transparent. Word 286, manifest. Definition: clear or obvious to the eye or mind. Example: the answer had been manifest the whole time. She simply had not been looking in the right direction. Repeat: manifest. Word 287, cogent. Definition: clear, logical, and convincing. Example: her analysis was cogent in a way that made the conclusion difficult to resist. Repeat: cogent. Word 288, synthesize. Definition: to combine elements to form a connected whole. Example: she synthesized everything she had learned into a framework that finally made sense of the whole. Repeat: synthesize. Word 289, consolidate. Definition: to make something physically stronger or more solid, to combine into a single unit. Example: the understanding consolidated over the following weeks into something she could actually use. Repeat: consolidate. Word 290, distill. Definition: to extract the essential meaning from something. Example: what she needed was to distill everything into the one thing that actually mattered. Repeat: distill. Word 291, comprehend. Definition: to grasp mentally, to understand. Example: she could finally comprehend what had been happening in a way that was precise rather than general. Repeat: comprehend. Word 292, penetrating. Definition: able to make a way through something, showing clear insight. Example: the penetrating clarity of the observation made everyone in the room sit back. Repeat: penetrating. Word 293, insight. Definition: the capacity to gain an accurate and deep understanding of something. Example: the insight came from the outside, someone else's question opening up what her own thinking had kept closed. Repeat: insight. Word 294, limpid. Definition: completely clear and transparent, uncomplicated and easy to understand. Example: the explanation was limpid in a way that technical language had prevented her from finding alone. Repeat: limpid. Word 295, unambiguous. Definition: not open to more than one interpretation. Example: for the first time, her own feelings were unambiguous. She knew what she wanted. Repeat: unambiguous. Word 296, sharp. Definition: tapered to a point, sudden and clear. Example: the memory came back sharp and complete, without any of the usual blurring. Repeat: sharp. Word 297, pellucid. Definition: translucently clear, easily understood. Example: the logic, once she had found it, was pellucid. She could not understand how she had missed it. Repeat: pellucid. Word 298, precision. Definition: the quality of being exact and accurate. Example: the precision of the feeling surprised her. She had expected something vaguer. Repeat: precision. Word 299, integrate. Definition: to combine one thing with another so that it becomes whole. Example: she was beginning to integrate what had happened into a version of herself that could hold it without being defined by it. Repeat. Integrate. Word 300. Understanding. Definition: the ability to understand something. Comprehension. Sympathetically aware. Example: the understanding arrived quietly and completely, not as a flash, but as a settlement, something that had been unsettled for a very long time, finally at rest. Repeat. Understanding. Closing. 300 words, 12 categories, and we have done it together. I want to sit with that for a moment before we close, because what we have done today is genuinely remarkable. We have moved through the full landscape of the inner life, through the ways memory arrives and fades and haunts and crystallizes, through the imagination's capacity to create worlds that do not yet exist, through the many faces of fear and all the forms that desire takes, through regret in its sharpest and most gentle forms, through hope that is tentative and hope that is unflinching, through doubt suspended at the threshold, through obsession that will not release, through grief in its many long phases, through the workings of the unconscious that we cannot directly see, and finally, through the extraordinary relief of clarity when understanding arrives and something that was suspended finally settles. These 300 words are not just vocabulary. They are a map of the interior, a way of navigating what happens inside you with more precision, more honesty, and more compassion than is possible without them. Here is what I want you to do before you close this lesson. Go back through the 12 categories and find the 30 words that feel most true to your own inner life. The ones that name something you have felt but not been able to say. Write them down. Say each one out loud 5 times, and then use at least 3 of them in something real before the end of this week. In a conversation, in a journal entry, in a message to someone you trust. Because these words become yours not when you understand them, but when you say them. When they come from your mouth and belong to your voice. When the distance between what you feel and what you can say becomes, word by word and sentence by sentence, a little smaller. This channel publishes a brand new English lesson every single day. If today's lesson gave you words you have been looking for, words for the things that happen inside you that you have never quite been able to name, please subscribe now and press the bell icon so you never miss what comes next. And if this masterclass moved you, please give it a like and share it with someone who loves language and loves the truth of their own inner life. Before you go, please subscribe to English in Moments and press the bell icon so you never miss a new lesson. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for spending this time with me today. I'm Elena from English in Moments, and I will see you in the very next lesson.